sets out your opinion separately from the factual findings and assumptions?
Some are set out separately, and then I can think of a couple of opinions that are in the same section with what I consider to be the factual bases.
All right, we'll come back to those when we look at your report in more detail. And G sets out the reasons for each of your opinions. So to understand to find your reasons, we will find them in the report. Is that right?
Yes.
The reasons for your opinions.
Yes.
And at 2.3, it says there should be included in or attached to the report the documents and other materials that the expert has been instructed to consider. Now, obviously, in this case, there's quite a volume of material, and it's not attached to your report, and we thank you for that. However, what your report might have done, and this is not a criticism, I'm just trying to work out what we now are going to do about this, is identify those materials. So are you able to identify for us what materials you've had regard to in formulating the opinions that you state in your report? There are obviously those that are specifically mentioned or referenced, but are there others?
The ones that I specifically relied upon, I tried to note, and I do apologize because I was already fully scheduled when I started working on this, and so I may not have been as conscientious about being sure that those attachments were there. But the ones that are, there wouldn't be another source that I know of now that I really relied upon that I didn't include.
All right. And perhaps you can help us in any event as to what the total corpus or total body of the materials was that you had available to you and which you consulted.
The Jehovah's Witnesses have published much of their material online, and so those are available readily online, and so I consulted some of those materials. I couldn't put my finger on a particular document that I relied upon that I haven't identified. If I saw something that so because the Jehovah's Witnesses publish so much information about what they believe, that it's not uncommon if you're talking about a particular part of what they do or an aspect of their life, that they might have 40 references to that. And
we found that.
Okay. So I just trying to narrow that down to a particular one that clearly states, that's what I tried to do in the report. And that doesn't mean that there aren't other references to it in other places.
Doctor, I think one of the difficulties with the report in the way that it's been written is, for example, in paragraphs 45 and 46, where you proffer an opinion, but we actually don't know what you've looked at to compare the Jehovah's Witnesses with. You see?
Right.
And we understand what you say about looking at Jehovah's Witness material, but before you can proffer an opinion, we need to know what the comparison is, don't we?
So the way that I structured it, I was trying to, in that whole section, identify the materials that I'm speaking about and then have kind of a concluding.
That's the Jehovah's Witnesses material.
Right. Oh, you're saying from other organizations.
Well, so you're offering an opinion to us, asking us to accept the opinion that they're better than anyone else, but we don't know what you've looked at, do we, to make that comparison?
Right, I understand.
What can we do with that?
It depends on how much time I have to prepare a response, but I can say, and maybe I should have said here, during the 1980s and 1990s, most religious organizations, faith-based organizations, weren't preparing materials to give to parents and families about sexual abuse. And so
do you know that for Australia? See, we've got to look at Australia, and before we could accept these opinions, I think we'd need some foundation for them.
Sure. And again, these are anecdotal things. I have asked organizations that I've worked with throughout Australia about what's already in place, because I don't like to ignore things that have already happened. So I've asked for those materials, and I've seen, for example, there's quite a bit of material available now through governmental entities about normal sexual development in children, and so that's a piece that I would use and say, well, you can go to this source. So throughout the time I've worked in Australia, I've always asked for what kinds of materials are the organizations providing, and that's where I arrived at that.
Yes, but you understand how difficult, don't you?
Of course.
When at the moment, I'm afraid we just couldn't.
You
for
can't
ourselves,
accept that.
we couldn't for ourselves accept that as necessarily the correct outcome, because we don't know what you've looked at.
Sure.
Which is one of the things that the federal court guidelines were trying to deal with, you understand, when an expert gives evidence.
Sure.
Yes.
Just returning to the materials on the Jehovah's Witness side of the comparison, I understand that publicly available, in other words, on the internet, the materials are from the period 2000 onwards and not prior to that. Is that your experience?
2000 and onward, with the materials being available online?
Yes.
I wouldn't be able to put a year to that when it became available online, the publications available online, but approximately.
You say one of your sources of access to Jehovah's Witness material is what's published online, and so then insofar as materials prior to 2000 are concerned, it would then be materials provided to you by those instructing you, I presume.
I thought that you were asking me what I had available to me when I was writing the report.
Yes.
And those materials were available now. I was writing the report last month.
Yes, but last month and this month, so I understand, and I'm asking that this is your experience. What's publicly available on the internet is Jehovah's Witness publications from 2000 onwards. In other words, if you go on the internet today, jw.org, you're not going to find a resource of pre-2000 publications.
Sometimes you can, yes, from far back.
So some you can.
Some you can.
So some of these articles that you referred to that are back in the 70s and 80s, for example, did you access those online, or were you provided them separately?
No, I asked for them.
Well, how did you know to ask for them?
Because I had prepared other reports that had to go back in time as well.
You'd seen them previously.
I'd seen those articles previously. So I reviewed a large body of publications in my initial review, and I picked out the pieces that I thought were critical, and those were the ones that I already had references to.
And you also referred to some publications, some documents, letters, for example, from the branch office to elders, which are not available publicly. I take it those were provided to you.
Yes.
And was there other material available to you or provided to you, such as witness statements in this case study, for example?
No.
Were you not furnished with Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Toole's witness statements?
Oh, yes. There was Mr. O'Brien. I'm sorry, when you said case study, I had forgotten that you're calling each one of these case studies, so case study 29.
Yes.
There were 3 witness statements that I was provided, and I don't recall all the names, but they were the director of the branch and the service director and the legal department director.
Yes. And were you furnished with the statements of either of the survivors who've been the subject of this case study?
No.
And did you consider any independent studies or research about the Jehovah's Witnesses?
No.
Sure, what time Your Honour would like to?
We'll go through to 11:30.
Now, there are really 2 issues that you address in your report, and you identify them as issue 3 and issue 4, taken from the terms of reference. And issue 3, you identify on page 4 of your report. You see that issue 3, case study 29, information regarding the systems, policies and procedures in place within the Jehovah's Witness Church for raising and responding to allegations of or concerns about child sexual abuse. So that's the first issue you were asked to form and provide an opinion on, am I right?
That's right.
And then the second issue is regarded as, labelled as issue 4, which commences towards the foot of page 7 of the report.
That's right.
Now, dealing with the first issue, as I read and understand the report, firstly, you set out in paragraphs 9 to 21 some background material, which presumably forms some basis or substratum to your opinion. Is that right?
That's right.
And then in paragraphs 22 to 35, you identify the facts on which you rely to then express the opinion in 36. Is that right?
Yes, and as I'm reading this, I see that on paragraph 23, I cited the wrong resource.
That brief review of contemporary sexual offence.
Yeah, it's actually the history that's been published. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yes, those would be the ones that I used to formulate the opinion on 36.
And the opinion you express, well, firstly, perhaps to get it out of the way, in the second sentence of paragraph 36, you say, because I have not reviewed any specific cases, I'm not able to offer opinions regarding whether the implementation of these guidelines has ultimately resulted in law-abiding responses, good practice of child protection or compassionate care of those who've experienced them. So, as I understand it, you're putting to one side the question of implementation. What you've done is essentially a documentary review. Is that right?
That's correct.
And the first sentence of 36 then expresses your opinion with regard to that documentary review. Is that right?
That's right.
On issue number 3.
That's right.
And what you do is you really do a comparison. On the one side of the comparison, you've got the Jehovah's Witnesses, and on the other side of the comparison, you've got religious organizations throughout the world. Is that right? This is in first sentence of 36.
Yes.
So you say the current messages to those who've experienced abuse and the guidelines that have been provided to elders and congregations of Jehovah's Witnesses are consistent with and in some respects better than the current practices of religious organizations throughout the world.
That's right.
Right. And dealing with the second side of the comparison first, the current practices of religious organizations throughout the world, it's really the same point that was raised by His Honour in relation to another paragraph. You'll see the difficulty there. We don't know what those current practices are. You haven't identified them.
Right.
Or what religious organizations they are.
That's right.
It's quite a big claim, religious organizations throughout the world. I take it you would like to limit that in some way. I mean,
Sure.
You don't claim to have knowledge of current practice of religious organizations throughout the world, do you?
No.
And
Can I just understand, what do you mean by current messages?
What I mean by current messages is what they're say in their publications to people who have experienced abuse about the healing process and the need to talk with other people, even to the messages, for example, if somebody has experienced abuse and they see in a publication that people are being told to be kind to those who've experienced abuse and things of that nature. That's what I mean.
Back at paragraph 25, you talk about elders being instructed to treat victims with kindness and to follow the established internal ecclesiastical procedures for allegations of abuse.
Yes.
Now, when you speak of current messages, are you capturing those matters as well in current messages?
When I speak of current messages, I'm really more speaking less about the procedures that they have in place for their internal governance questions and more about the general publications for individuals.
Procedures send messages too, don't they?
Yes.
In fact, the procedures that are followed may be much more powerful in giving a message than a publication.
It's possible.
And have you looked at the procedures?
The current procedures?
Yeah.
Yes,
Did you look at past procedures as well?
I have.
Okay. We'll come to those.
Okay.
Now, insofar as the first half of the comparison is concerned, the Jehovah's Witnesses themselves, of course, if any of the factual matters you've identified as underpinning that opinion are ultimately turn out to be mistaken, then that would throw the opinion into question, wouldn't it?
We're speaking about opinion 36.
Yes.
If information were to arise that shows that that's not correct, then the opinion would be incorrect.
Well, let's be clear about it. If information is to arise or be presented which shows that one or other of the factual matters set out preceding paragraph 36 is incorrect, then that would throw the opinion expressed in the first paragraph of 36 into question.
Into question, yes.
So can I take you to paragraph 10 of your report? And you can read that paragraph, but in particular, when you get to the last sentence, which says that elders are viewed as fellow workers by their fellow elders and by other congregational members. Now, congregational members are referred to as publishers, is that right?
In some cases, yes.
Well, I'll use that terminology interchangeably with congregational members. Now, of course, you can't say really how congregational members view the elders, can you?
I would say based on publications.
Well, there's no empirical study, is there, as to how congregation members view their elders, is there?
If there's an empirical study, I'm not aware of it.
And ultimately, that's a subjective question in the sense that it's what's going on in the minds of the congregation members that you're addressing yourself to.
What I'm really addressing is the messages that are in the materials for elders and the materials that are in the publications that speak to that particular question.
And those materials are published by the governing body in Brooklyn.
That's right.
That's right. And distributed throughout the world.
That's right.
They're certainly not published by the congregation members.
No, they're not.
Now, you're aware, I take it, that in the Jehovah's Witness faith, elders are regarded as being appointed by the Holy Spirit.
My understanding was that they are appointed, but with the guidance of the Holy Spirit.
Well, let's take a quick look at that. I'd like you to look at tab 109 of our tender bundle, which will go up in front of you on the screen. And we can show you the first page of that. You'll be familiar with this textbook, I take it, Organized to Do Jehovah's Will.
Yes.
You've looked at this for formulating your report.
Yes.
And this applied from 2005 and thereafter.
There was a previous version of it, but it wasn't called the same name.
Yes, there's a previous version, and testimony that you've given in one of the other cases really concerned the previous version. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. And this is given to, if we just scroll down a little bit, you'll see it. It says this book is issued to, and there's space to fill it in, and the date, and the place of baptism, and the date. It's given to baptized publishers in the Jehovah's Witness Church, as I understand it, on the occasion of their baptism. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding.
Yes. And if we have a look at page 30 of that report, which is ringtail 16, I beg your pardon, can you go back to page 28?
It might be easier for me to have a
Indeed, it probably will be. We'll organize one.
it's a little bit hard for me to. Thank you.
So you'll see in 28, halfway down, it says, "We are grateful for the Spirit-appointed overseers in the congregation." Do you see that?
Yes.
And if we look at 29, the top of 29, qualifications for overseers. Now, just to clarify, in this publication, the phraseology overseers is what's now referred to as elders. Is that right?
There are other kinds of overseers, but they're referring to elders.
Yes. And you'll see in the second sentence it says, only if they qualify can it be said that they are appointed by the Holy Spirit. And there's a reference, a scriptural reference.
Yes.
And at the top of page 37, which is ringtail 23, it says, their course of conduct and the fruits of their labors would give evidence that they are appointed by the Holy Spirit. So you accept that in the view of the Jehovah's Witnesses, elders are appointed by the Holy Spirit. My team can dig out another 40 references for you.
Yes.
And if we go back to page 30, towards the foot of the page, that's ringtail 16. Dr. Applewhite, just for clarification, you can ignore my references to ringtail. That's for the operator putting documents on the screen. You'll see in the lower paragraph on that page, although the scriptural requirements may at first seem to be somewhat overwhelming, there would be no reason for Christian men to shy away from desiring the fine work associated with the office of overseer. And then it says, by taking the lead and manifesting fine Christian qualities, overseers encourage other members of the congregation to do the same. So it's the case, isn't it, that overseers are required and expected to take the lead in the congregation?
Well, here it's saying that they need to be a good role model. They certainly have a leadership role,
Yes.
but there's no question about that.
And on page 31, we'll see it at the top of the page. Those standing before the congregation as appointed overseers are required to take the lead. And the congregants would see them as the congregational leaders, wouldn't they?
Yes.
Yes. And at 32, you'll see that towards the end of the first paragraph, that about 8 or 10 lines down, it says, others in the congregation would be moved to imitate this fine example and entrust their spiritual life to the shepherd's care. In other words, congregants regard themselves as entrusting their spiritual life to the care of the elders. Is that right?
Yes.
And also on that page, at the foot of the page, exercising oversight of the affairs of the congregation requires a man to demonstrate a measure of orderliness and so on. So elders exercise oversight over the affairs of the congregation, don't they?
They do.
And of course, as you've set out in your report, elders are responsible for investigating reports of wrongdoing, is that right?
They are.
And in the case of, according to the rules that are set out, them finding that there's sufficient evidence for that, if there's serious wrongdoing, they then establish a judicial committee, that's right, isn't it?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yes, of course. Your Honour, would this be
Put the question again,
I'll
and then we'll
repeat it after.
put the question again now, and we'll then take the adjournment.
Thank you. It's also that the case, isn't it, that the elders, on finding that an allegation of serious wrongdoing is sufficiently proved or evidenced, they then establish a judicial committee.
That's correct.
And the judicial committee of 3 elders will essentially have a form of a hearing and make a decision in relation to that wrongdoing,
That's correct.
including as to sanctions.
Yes.
Yes.
And just so we make sure we are on common ground, all of the elders are men, aren't they?
They are.
So the process of investigation and determination involves only men.
That's right.
We'll take the morning adjournment.
Yeah, Dr. Jason Morrison, theologist again. I just want to say thank you for watching the videos, and I hope you got plenty of self-rediscovery and freedom out of it. If you watched it on YouTube, please share or like, maybe even comment. If you watched it on Facebook, like, comment, share. But most of all, get out and live. This isn't a rehearsal. You've got a one-off life. Don't let your loyalty and your faithfulness blind you to the life that you should be experiencing. Till the next video, thank you for watching, and bye for now.